At the end of the day, we make T-shirts. We are not. That's actually a core value of ours. Is we make T-shirts. We're not saving the world. We recognize, your life isn't going to be radically altered or changed. It's just a T-shirt.
Today, we have Connor Hitchcock with us, and we are doing the Beautiful Thinkers podcast IU edition. So I also have Joshua and Mark with me, and it's so nice to be actually in the room with you. Connor founded Homefield, and one of the reasons that the students wanted to talk to him is the theme this season is saturated, and we are exploring that in a multitude of ways. And Connor, the reason Homefield came up was looking at your company through the lens of a very saturated category. And then how did you disrupt, and how I think the arc of this conversation is how do you stay scrappy and scale? I think is what we're interested in hearing about. Mark, you jump in, and I think there was a leading question you wanted to start the conversation with.
I just wanted to start with your mission as a whole, Homefield's mission, in that staying with the high quality goods and also having that thoughtful design and sort of connecting with the culture, breaking through that saturated apparel market. How necessary is that unique and thoughtful quality?
Mm-hmm. You hit on the word thoughtful, that we being myself and my co-founder, Christa, who's also my wife, we both are huge college sports fans. I grew up a huge IU fan, went to IU. Krista's dad played football at Michigan, and she grew up in Michigan, going to Michigan football games every Saturday. So we both recognized a lack of what we felt was thoughtful collegiate apparel in the market. So that's actually why we first started making it. And by thoughtful, meaning, things that got to my experience that didn't just say school name across the chest. However, licensed collegiate apparel, to what's been referenced a couple times already, is very saturated, the market, oversaturated. I felt that we had a better product than what was in these channels anyway, but my first opening when talking about licensing was direct-to-consumer through our website. And so that's where I was able to say, okay, well, give me a chance then in direct-to-consumer, which is my background anyway, was direct-to-consumer marketing and e-commerce. So I felt like we were the best team to do it with Krista's design background and my background in direct-to-consumer. So that was our initial pitch to schools, and still schools were very hesitant to give us a license because they'd say, oh, we have T-shirt providers already. They can just go open their own website. But we beat a lot of them to the punch there.
Do you have if thoughtful is a core word, is there a mission outside of that?
Thoughtfulness for us extends in every direction. So it starts with the core product, right? I think some companies try to create these mission statements that are far or more than what they actually do. It's like, we make T-shirts. At the end of the day, we make T-shirts. We are not. That's actually a core value of ours. Is we make T-shirts. We're not saving the world. We recognize, your life isn't going to be radically altered or changed. It's just a T-shirt. We're not trying to, globally dominate. We're trying to make a great product and have some fun along the way.
You originally started with Hoosier Proud, and it wasn't selling T-shirts, was it?
So at first, yeah, you're right. It was Hoosier Proud, and it was when I was a student at IU. So in 2014, state of Indiana specific stickers that I literally walked around Bloomington, walked around Indianapolis, went door to door, was selling these stickers to these stores. And then a year in, I'd set up an Instagram page, set up a website. They asked for T-shirts, and I lied and said we did make T-shirts, and we didn't.
Like every good entrepreneur does.
That's right. And so I texted Christa at the time, who at the time was then girlfriend, and she was at Miami of Ohio, and she's the design background. And I said, hey, can you design a few shirts along these parameters? And she did. I figured out where to get them made. Eventually, I taught myself how to screen print, and so I was doing so in my apartment right across from Classic Lanes, if you know where that bowling alley is off 17th. So yeah, I was doing that when I was a student, but it was Hoosier Proud, was Indiana-specific stuff, not Indiana University, just the state of.
Just the state of. And going into that, there was never a plan of getting into college apparel right away, was there?
No, I was pretty focused. It started off as a side project. It was growing. I didn't really think I could do it full time. Just was something fun I like to do. And then Indiana, my final year, played in a bowl game against Duke, and they lined up for field goal to send it to triple overtime in the bowl game, and it was called no good. It looked like it was good, though. And so all off season in Indiana Twitter, of which I frequented then and still frequent a lot now, even with a burner account, people were...
Smart.
I know, right? I can't. Yeah. It's back in the day, I could say a lot more stuff from the Homefield account. Everybody in the offseason was pretending to be really mad, but they were kind of a little mad about this meaningless bowl game, and they were all screaming the kick was good. And so going to the next football season in 2016, I graduated. I was working in e-commerce, and an hour before kickoff of the 2016 football season, I just put up a shirt that just said the kick was good, and it got picked up like crazy among the Indiana blogs and on Twitter with this side project, Hoosier Proud. And so I was able to use that design as an entryway to go talk to IU and say, hey, I think I have, from a marketing perspective and an e-commerce perspective, I think I have a unique pulse on the Indiana fan base. Would you be willing? I'm a recent alum. Would you be willing to give me a chance at a license? And I said, yeah, sure.
And you launched the company with just 8 teams in Indiana, right?
Mm-hmm.
Talk about the licensing piece of it and the challenges that created, and then how you got over those.
The Indiana market alone, there are plenty of businesses that do millions of dollars just in Indiana. That just takes so much time, though, right? So if you're starting from scratch, you only have 8 schools, and only 2 of them are Power 5 with Indiana and Purdue, and then Butler's your third biggest school. It just takes time to establish a brand, and so we burned through money quick. We didn't raise much money, relatively speaking, to raising money, and so it was a pretty sink or swim. And licensing is difficult because a smaller school will take a chance on you, which is awesome.
And that was part of your growth strategy.
Yes,
yeah.
A lot of small schools. A bigger school, they won't, because you pose more of a risk, and you have to prove that you're not a risk. And you have to prove that you're doing something unique and new. Otherwise, you're just simply a risk, right? We got chances with Indiana and Purdue, proved it out with some mid-majors. Then we were able to show other larger institutions how well we were doing with mid-majors, which we were over-indexing for sure. And so it took a lot of time. And it's funny how competitive it was, too, because nobody really wanted to be the first mover. So we had a launch strategy back in the day called Big New Saturday. It went very well. But it took Tulane in Hawaii doing really well for a school like Michigan State to be like, oh, that's kind of cool what you're doing with Tulane in Hawaii. Yeah, I'll give you a chance. And then another basketball school in Syracuse was like, oh, Michigan State's doing it? Sure. And then UConn was like, well, Syracuse is our rival. I guess we could do that. Auburn thought it was cool, so they jumped on board. And at the time, we were releasing the rankings of which school had done the best launch-wise. So Auburn was number 1, and that's when we got a call from Alabama, and they were like, hey, that can't stand. And so they became my number 1 launch. Right, yeah, we were able to play some schools off of each other. But licensing, 5 years in now, we have 180 licenses. So licensing is very tricky in a lot of ways, and we've been very fortunate because we were able to prove out that we were doing something totally unique, not just in concept, but in reality with sales, frankly, but in reaction on social media.
You mentioned the Big New Saturday, and so part of your approach that you said was going after the small schools. Well, there's hundreds of small schools across the country.
Yeah.
And each small school has something significant about them that's different from all the others. So how did Homefield go about doing the research of all of the small schools and figuring out what makes those schools' fan bases tick?
It was part fan base and part also just their logos, right? So Tulane, for example, we had a great call with them. It's the Green Wave. And their colors are this beautiful light blue. They've got some teal in there. They've got some green in there. And they have a pretty ardent, it's a small private school in New Orleans, but, I mean, their football program used to be in the SEC back in the day. Even now, recently, they just beat USC in a New Year's Six Bowl this past year. They won the AAC last year. They won it this year. There's a pretty strong support online. And so if it was for me, observing a community online around Tulane football, even though it was small, it was powerful. And so that's why I reached out to Tulane. They agreed with the vision of what we were doing. And at the time, I mean, even a bunch of mid-majors would tell us no all the time. But when we launched them, they were the first school of Big News Saturday. We launched them, and not only did Tulane grads flock to it, but a ton of people just love the green wave. I mean, very few people hate Tulane unless you're like a conference rival, right? If you're an Indiana grad, what reason do you have to hate Tulane?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, looking on your Twitter, it seems like you, from the beginning, have really understood the importance of that personality and being obviously unique, but also being humorous and relatable. So in the beginning, was that thought out and was that strategic, or was it just sort of you? And, you know, how has that kind of evolved as you guys have moved into the spotlight?
It was thought out. Who cares if I say, go shop the Michigan collection, they just won a game, and I drop a link in? Nobody cares. But so if we were going to do it, you know, after a year in, you know, talking about it earlier, it was tough when we launched with only 8 schools. Like, things weren't looking great. We had to do something different and unique in order to establish something different and unique. So that's what we did with the Twitter account. And so at the time, there were just 3 employees, myself and Christa being 2 of them. And I decided in the summer of 2019, like, I've enjoyed, you know, being on Twitter as a lurker for a long time. Might as well just start talking to people. Like, what's a way that engages me? And maybe I just start talking that way from the Homefield account. And so it coincided at the time with a campaign, what was maybe called a prophecy, with the Crimson Quarry blog at the time, which was run by a couple of friends of mine, run by a different crew now. But we had a few beverages one evening, and one of our friends, a few of those beverages in, said, I think Indiana's going to win 9 football games this year. And as we all have associations with Indiana, we understand how hard winning 9 football games is.
Yeah, that's bold.
Very, very bold. And we had won 5 the year prior. And he tweeted it out from the Crimson Quarry account that Indiana was going to win 9 football games. He wrote a whole article. And another friend of ours at the table said, yeah, man, 9 Windiana. And so they started the proclamation of 9 Windiana, and we made a shirt that just said 9 Windiana on it. We're just tweeting about Indiana football in a funny way, basically all season from the Homefield account. We become known as the Indiana football brand. Indiana wins 8 regular season games to set up the bowl game for the 9th win. And it got to the point where the @IU Bloomington account was tweeting #9Windiana, to the point where after Indiana beat Purdue in the bucket game for the 8th win to go into the bowl game where they would play for the 9th, players were grabbing the camera, the ESPN camera, and screaming 9 Windiana into the camera. People on like talk shows on ESPN or wherever talking about college football, they would say 9 Windiana. It was like a whole thing. IU invited us to be the official vendor for all the festivities at the Gator Bowl. We had all these 9 Windiana shirts, and then we go and we are up 13 on Tennessee at the Gator Bowl with 5 minutes to go. I get all these texts, congrats, man, as though I had something to do with it. People are going crazy.
Hey, it was you.
No. Indiana loses the football game. I tell that whole story because that was the tone we started to take on in our social media. The hope is to build a brand so that it runs itself, right? And that people feel compelled enough and have a connection enough with your brand that they're going to go tell other people. And they begin to do the marketing for you. Think about it. I mean, if you're so much more likely to go try or do something or not do something if a friend or someone trusted tells you.
Word of mouth.
Right, word of mouth. That is all marketing folks are going for. And so that's why we spend our time talking to the WKU Hilltoppers podcast. And I'm in the DMs. Like, I'll be DMing from the Homefield account with some random account that has like 60 followers just because they're like, look what I found in my grandpa's basement, you know, of some Marshall Thundering Herd flag or whatever. But if you tell 5 of your friends about a great experience with Homefield and they tell 5 of their friends and they tell 5 of their friends, it's exponential. It takes a lot of time, but over time, that slow bake builds something completely different than what others who are just trying to throw money into ads, which, look, that has its time and place. And we spend money on advertising for sure. But
even then, it seems like you're doing pretty niche. You're actually going to the smaller podcasts. I mean, so one of the phrases we were talking about is in marketing, there is that phrase, the riches are in the niches, because that is where you get your fan base. And I think that was one of the things that attracted these guys to your brand is how well and how deftly it may be 60 people, but they are rabid fans. Like, talk about just fanship and how you fan the flames of that.
Yeah, riches are in the niches. I'd never heard that before. I like it. So, you know, I was saying earlier, college sports are so communal, and that we talk about thoughtfulness as the core of our brand. I have to understand everything about the end customer. I'm making this apparel for people like me, but they maybe cheer for Purdue or they cheer for Western Michigan or whomever. But I want to understand their experience and enhance their experience, and something I love so much in college sports. So it's understanding the end consumer and what they want and how they interact, and then tailoring our experience for them.
So it seems like Homefield has kind of been built on seeing opportunity and really capitalizing on it. First, from the Pinstripe Bowl, which wasn't in Homefield, that was way back in the day. But seeing that opportunity, capitalizing, that moves into something new, like Big New Saturday, where you see that Twitter trend, you see the personality you could have on Twitter, and sort of capitalizing on that. So I want to talk about the future and where you guys may be going with that, because you guys just recently dropped an Indianapolis Colts line.
Sure
so
did.
I think you could feel where this question is going to go. Is professional sports something that Homefield may be striving towards, and is that another window that you guys are trying to jump through?
Funny enough, all of the pro opportunities have been inbound. So I'll start to say we are not pursuing NFL licensing. We're not pursuing NBA, MLB, WNBA, none of it right now. We feel like we are so early on in what we're doing. We're only 5 years old as a brand. We celebrated our 5th birthday in August. And so there's a few really cool angles we can take with that to tell a brand story. However, I've seen every brand that has tried to do what we've done goes before us. They get collegiate licensing and they use it as a stepping stone, and they leave the college fans in the dust. And it's XYZ brand used to, this brand used to, this brand used to. We're college. To that point earlier about niches, college to a lot of people seems like a niche compared to the NBA or the NFL, because you have arguably the same size pie, though the NFL trumps all. It's much bigger. But the pro leagues divided 30 ways, where college is literally divided thousands of ways. And if you go Power 5, it's 65 ways. So it's a lot harder to market, right? Because you can scale marketing to 30 audiences with the same result better than you can hundreds. But we actually love it, and we think there's just a greater passion there. So, you probably can't throw money into Facebook ads or Instagram ads the same way and get the same result with college that you can with the NFL or the NBA. In fact, I know you can't, because I have friends who are doing the NFL and NBA. But you also won't receive the same passion for the brand that we have because it's college. So,
what do you think are the benefits from starting a company and a company in college apparel and sports from Indiana?
Yeah, Indiana as a state really cares a lot about sports in general, particularly high school and college sports, right? Indiana, high school basketball, for example, 15 of the 16 biggest gyms in the country are in Indiana, right? The NCAA is obviously based in Indianapolis. Indiana, Purdue basketball, both men's and women's, have really storied histories that people are selling games out for time immemorial, right? The state is known as the home of basketball anyway. Yeah, it's a good environment.
As you're moving into your future, what do you envision for your future, just in general? What's the next step for Homefield? I just want to get kind of your view on that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's funny to think about going from like those stickers to now, like we keep dropping all these jackets that are like significantly more, like 30 times the dollar amount. But
we were like going through and researching and scrubbing like the old Hoosier Proud Instagram, and it was just so funny, like, It was back in 2016, so that's what, 7 years ago. Like pocket T-shirts were still a hot commodity, and all the different things that have changed since from now. So
a lot has changed. Yeah, with Homefield, I mentioned earlier that we're not saving the world; we just make T-shirts. And a lot of brands, one, try to convince people that they are saving the world with whatever they do, but also,
especially now.
Yes, especially now, and then also. My opinion is they try to move too quickly from their core products to do a bunch of other stuff. And that's because there's a lot of pressure on them to, just keep going up and up and up. Yeah, to your point, Josh. Yeah, up and up and up and just keep scaling. And we're certainly growing. But there's a lot of greed that maybe blinds brand direction, in my opinion. And so we're going to keep doing the core stuff we do, but we're also going to add statement pieces, like the jackets. Those have been a huge hit. Will they be in style 5 years from now? Maybe. They may not be, but something else will be. To Josh's point, pocket tees. Those were a thing 6 years ago, 7 years ago.
They may come back.
But it's responding to trends we see, just filling the need for the collegiate sports fan. Every Saturday, Michigan Stadium seats 108,000 people, right? And there are tens of millions of people who cheer for the Michigan Wolverines. Does every single one of them want to buy a $34 T-shirt and a $72 hoodie? No. But a good portion do, right? So that we are just scratching the surface. I come to IU, and I teach class once a year so far, or I'll go. Even this morning, I was at the business school talking to a class, and most people have never heard of Homefield when I start talking, right? And they're college kids on the campus. I built this thing, right? So we have so far to go even within that. So it's continuing to develop those relationships within the fan base, and it's also, adding those statement pieces or responding to what's in trend or providing something unique. But it's staying pretty core to what we do and just doing it well over a long period of time.
And I know you had talked about that the Saturday news, you've stopped doing that, and now you're doing the limited edition or limited runs of things.
Yeah. So Big News Saturday, we ran it for 4 seasons, and we ended up using 50 schools or so in there. A couple of the words in there that make it key are big. So all of the big schools we had launched already by the end of it, and then new. So if we've already launched the school, that was an operative term. So even though we would do refreshes, we drop Penn State, it's a massive launch, and then a year later we do a refresh, add some more pieces. It just wasn't the same because there wasn't this pent-up demand. And so now we have pivoted more that we have all these schools to providing fresh apparel that you can wear every year. You want something new, you want a new look, but these jackets, for example, have been a great one that it fits with the calendar. Big News Saturday, we drop it in June. There's nothing going on. People would pay attention to us. But now it's, how can we get you basketball-themed apparel every year? How can we get you stuff for football every year? How can we get you something for when the leaves start to change, right? Trying to make sense for what's going on in the calendar, either sports-wise, weather-wise, all of that. So some of it's limited run. Some of it's just, hey, new T-shirts to just, freshen things up a bit.
And so how much of your consumer base is repeat purchasing?
50%, which is really high.
That is super high.
5 years in, a typical direct-to-consumer brand, you're looking for 15 or 20% as a goal. And it's making sure they have that great experience and that we're providing something they like that causes that, right? So, we know if we get you in as a customer, you're probably going to come back, which is great for us.
Going with that, you say it's 15 to 20% is good. Knowing that you guys are at 50%, how does that make you and Christa feel like as a business owner?
It's really humbling that, it was 5 years ago that was in our basement. It wasn't that long ago. So it's really humbling that people react the way they do to the brand. And it's a fulfillment of a vision for sure, right? So, when we go and we do pop-ups and we go to Ann Arbor to this bar and there's a line of people out the door before we start the pop-up, it's just very humbling that people would react the way they do. I feel very fortunate that we've achieved this success because, frankly, a lot of people have great ideas and are really good executors, and sometimes it just doesn't work out. We were close to walking away a year in because just wasn't working out, and we were just fortunate that Indiana decided to have an uncharacteristic football season. I mean, I legitimately believe that they saved the brand, that they almost won 9 football games. So,
hey, they owed you for being such a loyal fan all
that's
those
right.
tough years.
That's right. They finally loved me back.
So I know a lot of people tend to know you for your vintage and your premium. So it's kind of a 2-part question. Is the vintage, are you literally just reprinting vintage ideas, and does that help you bypass licensing, or are you doing more of a retro and designing based on what was back then?
More of the latter. So everything we do, we get approved by the school.
Okay.
So if it's in reference to Indiana, even if it doesn't say Indiana on it, but it's clearly in reference to it, we get approved by the school and have to pay a royalty on. Sometimes we will recreate, if there was an iconic shirt, we'll recreate it. But most of the time it's doing research. Oh, okay, this logo was used in this fashion in the 80s. We'll put our own spin on it that's uniquely Homefield, right? Maybe we'll draw on words from the fight song, or, maybe there was a marketing campaign from that football season that the athletic department used. We can use some of that verbiage, right? We try to make it authentic to the time, but then also we have another wrinkle where we'll use old logos and present them in a new way. So a little bit of both.
So why do you think the vintage is so hot right now?
I think it is here to stay, and that is just different than what you currently see. And anything that's different is always going to be, the second. There's so many logos that people hated when they were the primary logo. And the second they're no longer the primary logo, people love. Like I think about the Detroit Pistons jerseys, the teal ones that they had for 4 years. I lived in Metro Detroit at the time. People hated those things the second they were retired. Now that they're the throwback jerseys for the Pistons, right? Or the oval that Indiana wore on our helmets for 4 years. People hated it at the time. It's objectively ugly, but I love it because I watched Antoine Randall wear it and it's no longer in use, right? So stuff like that, I think people will always, there's some nostalgia tie-in. There's also something of, oh, that's different than what I normally see on Saturdays or during a game.
So premium, you're charging more. You came into the market charging more than the category. How did you make that decision, and how would you, part of the things we like to do on the podcast is what advice do you have for people? Because that seems very counterintuitive.
Yeah.
But talk about how you decided and how that...
To go with the high pricing. Well, we're using premium materials, and so those cost more. And so in order to not lose money, you have to pay that. Additionally, royalties are a big percent of revenue. I can't say publicly what percentage we pay, but if you're in the licensed collegiate space, it's about doubled the last 10 years. And so you pay a lot back to the schools because it's an officially licensed product. We pay a lot to make the product. We pay our people well, and that's a factor of it too. And we're not sorry about that. We're going to keep doing it, right? So at the end of the day, we think it's worth the value, and maybe you don't buy 10 in a year, maybe you buy 6, but I guarantee you it's going to be good. I guarantee you if something's wrong with the shirt, because inevitably something will be every once in a while, we're going to take care of it, no questions asked. Unless you are a massive, massive, massive brand, it's really hard to do what we do any cheaper than what we offer it at.
I would say the one wrap-up question, where can we find you on socials?
Yes. So the Homefield Twitter or X account, I'm going to call it Twitter.
Everybody does.
Is at Homefield Apparel, APPARL. That is because there is a limit to how many characters you can have in your handle, and we have kept it that way. Someone squatted on the at Homefield account for forever. We're never going to change it, even if we got access to at Homefield, because it's become a joke. On Instagram, it is at Homefield Apparel. TikTok, search Homefield Apparel, and that'll come up. But those are the 3 primary platforms that we are on for social. So,
as a marketer, I'm impressed with just your focus and your coming in at a premium price point, even though you have to. But it just really seems like I think you talk about thoughtful, but I would say the other side of that coin is surprise, and you're really good at that.
Thanks.
And taking chances and staying risky. So I wish you guys well, and I hope you stay scrappy and scale, and we'll continue to watch you from the sidelines.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me. This is a great time.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Connor. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. This episode was created and produced at the IU Media School as part of the Beautiful Thinkers podcast, IU Edition. To follow along this season, check out The Beautiful Thinkers on Instagram and TikTok. Special thanks to Natalie Ingalls for our music and the students who researched and recorded this episode, Mark Holder, Joshua Fugate, and Tyler Matthews.